Hi, this is Doug Howard from Growth Team Strategies, and I'm here with Kathi Fleck, one of our all-star consultants, with another episode of Selling the Dream. And today we're going to talk about probably one of the biggest drivers, I think, of company value and things that buyers look for, and that's the notion of recurring revenue and how powerful that can be in, driving the value of a company and really getting, I think, buyers comfortable with, what they can expect in future revenue and that kind of thing. So, Kathi, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Doug. How are you doing?
I'm doing wonderfully. Spring has sprung, so people should be getting businesses ready to sell and thinking about things they'd rather be doing than being in their business. And everybody should be thinking about, where does that leave them for their business? So, I think we need a business spring cleaning is what I'm calling for right now. So, Kathi, I know, obviously with your business, the remodeling world, there's kind of a belief there is no recurring revenue, right? In that, it's not like someone buys 3 pizzas a month or gets their hair done every 6 weeks or that kind of thing. Matter of fact, I think a lot of remodeling projects are people that have never done them before, and maybe they hope they'll never do them again. But what do you think in terms of recurring revenue? Were there aspects of your business that were recurring or ways that kind of helped address that concern about, hey, like once I buy this thing, where am I getting revenue from?
And that's a good question. There are sources, and I'd say something like a maintenance or a concierge handyman type business. There are companies, some of my peers, who would have that type of concierge service where they would go out once a quarter and of course, a homeowner would pay a certain fee for this service, like HVAC companies might do to come out and service your HVAC. But they would go out and have a list for a certain number of hours and do anything that the homeowner wanted to have done that fit into that handyman realm. And so that's a way to keep upfront in front of the client, as well as having some of that recurring revenue that would come in on a regular basis and keep the guys busy too, the in-house team. So I think that's a big one that is good for a potential buyer to take a look at.
Yeah, I know one of the industries we do a lot of work in, we're doing more and more work in, is the wood flooring industry. And, there's projects that they have, and some of that is one time, and some of it's part of a bigger project they're doing with a contractor. But then there's also the sanding and finishing and, upkeep that they do on certain projects that can become a much more consistent revenue source year over year, right? And selling in that maintenance can be really important. I think I had that revelation when we had the accounting firm, because even though that's relatively recurring, and there was a lot of stickiness to it, we didn't really see the same level of recurring revenue until we actually started offering payroll services. And when we did, that was something, people might not like changing accountants, but they will. People generally don't like changing payroll services if they can absolutely avoid it. And there's never really a good time. And do we finish the year? And so we found that really drove the value of our company, especially in the markets where we had a more active payroll service. So, I think when people start thinking about that recurring revenue, it's important to, first of all, recognize it may not be your biggest revenue source. It may not even be the thing you make the most money on, but it may be the thing that gets a buyer comfortable that there's going to be enough of a flow there that those other things only have to be reasonably good, to get some of that consistency, And so I started my career in the gas station business, and, there wasn't a lot of profit made on gasoline itself. It was usually cents per gallon that was the margin on it. But there was an understanding that a certain gas station on a certain street with a particular amount of traffic, as long as it had a competitive price, would generate recurring revenue. And then that revenue would, translate into someone buying a soda or getting a repair done or getting a car washed, whatever. I don't think it has to be the whole business is recurring. Now, certainly, if you have the kind of business where your customers are under contract, and those go on for multiple years, if you have a very high renewal rate, those kinds of things, I think those speak much more loudly. So, Kathi, when you were having those kinds of conversations, like with your broker and things like that, what was the discussion around some of those kinds of things?
Well, I think if you have it, great. I did not have it at that time, and we started our company with handyman services, which was then turning into remodeling. So those clients, we always took care of our clients if they had other needs. So it was really, I think it's kind of a selling point in keeping your staff busy and keeping that cash flow going so you don't have so much money going out paying staff without having enough work during some of the lean times. And I can see that going into almost any business. If you think about the payroll service, your staff, if they were
Sure.
doing that, would be occupied during the not so busy times. So I think from a brokerage standpoint or a buyer standpoint, at least it offers the opportunity that the new owner could go into those areas. They could expand and have that maintenance or concierge type program if they wanted to. So it gives that kind of potential business opportunity.
Yeah. And I think, for businesses that truly don't have that or can only isolate a certain part of it, I also encourage folks to look at like recurring referral sources and things like sources of business that where the individual customer may not be recurring, but there's a certain amount of activity we can count on from that particular source. Like, for
Mm-hmm.
instance, some construction companies do a lot of work with certain architects or interior designers, and they may not know which project they're going to do, but they're going to get a couple projects a year as long as they maintain
Mm-hmm.
that relationship. Other things are when people show a certain area of expertise, or they have an affiliation with a particular, business association or trade association and things like that. Again, it may not be that it's recurring revenue and that it's guaranteed from the customer, but it may be just from that source of business. We have enough that it continues to happen over again. And we have a place to go to get more of it.
I think it's a relationship. I know when I had my remodeling business, I really developed very solid relationships with any of the trades. And I didn't go and price shop three different ones each time. It was just way too much, I'm going to say, hassle and trouble. And once I got my pricing set out, then I just had that loyalty with the trades. And of course, they would come in and take care of any mishaps or issues that needed to be handled at any time. So I think in all of these areas, it's good relationship building and it gives you the stability for your business.
Yeah. Yeah. No, there's no question. I think also people need to see, I know there's been somewhat of an ebb and flow in certain industries, especially since COVID and some of the other economic things that have been going on, is that sometimes people will have fits and starts with their marketing activity as opposed to staying, with some level of consistency, some level of making sure that we're continually getting the name out there, making those connections and those kinds of things. And I think, more often than not, um, people need to really focus on, especially, if they want this to be something that's ongoing, the last couple of years of owning that business before you transition may be some of the most important to make that investment and the continuity, because a lot of times with service businesses, it's the personal relationship with the owner or the reputation
Right.
that's going to drive some of that. But now we want the business to stand on its own, right? We want it to be able to go out there and be successful without that owner there, without one of us being still in that seat.
Mm-hmm.
And so, maybe where it was a particular, not particularly necessary to spend a lot of money to promote the company when I was bringing in business or you were bringing in business, it gets a little bit more important that someone's going to recognize the name of the company and the processes that we have and the SEO for the website so that someone coming in has the expectation people are going to be able to find me. They're going to have a good, you
Mm-hmm.
know,
Mm-hmm.
impression based on what they see and, those kinds of things, right?
I agree. I just think any of that support to give a really solid entity when you're selling the business. And then, of course, the new buyer, the new owner can take it and do what they want with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I know we've used the expression on other episodes about sort of running through the finish line, staying
Mm-hmm.
committed, that kind of thing. Marketing seems like one of those areas where people may be a little bit prone to kind of taper things off when they're starting to
Mm-hmm.
wind down a little bit. But I think that's a telltale sign for a buyer. They want to see
Yeah,
that
it
continuity.
definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they want that consistency and they want it over a period of time. So not only looking at the financials, but what are the opportunities that they can explore so that they can have a more profitable business as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And ironically, it seems like some businesses, if they've had an extraordinary year, they've made like a huge sale, like a project that's a little out of the ordinary, sometimes that can almost be a little disruptive to a buyer, maybe a little disconcerting. I mean, it's nice to see the revenue, but then it gets really hard for them to know like what to expect going forward, right?
Yeah, if you have all your eggs in one basket or just a couple, so to speak, it does make it very difficult to pick up the speed because you put so much of your effort into that one or two projects that you've got, and then you've got to backtrack a little bit. I've seen it with companies that are not even selling, where they struggle for several years afterwards because they put so much effort into one solid revenue-making year.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I mean, I think to me, a lot of work under contract, ongoing memberships and those kinds of things, that kind of recurring revenue could be huge. Services that are maybe hard to change from, kind of like, what I was saying about the payroll and that kind of thing. That's maybe the next level down. But then short of that, things that have just a recurring nature to them, we go back to the same customer base, the same referral sources, I think are really important. I think a buyer is always going to feel like they're going to bring new revenue in, but they want to know that there's an existing base of revenue there.
Yeah.
So
and I think it gives a lot of confidence to the seller as well, where you're having, you've got enough flow going through your business, cash flow going through your business.
Yeah. Well, and honestly, if anybody's going to do any form of seller financing, the seller has to be just as concerned about that continuing revenue flow as the buyer is. Right. And I see that even with businesses that don't sell, but maybe transition to the next generation, it's like, well, that's fine, but we still want that next generation to be successful. And if any part of mom or dad's retirement is based on that check coming from the next generation, it's really important for everybody to make sure there's a revenue flow.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
So, all right. Well, I would say that folks that are thinking about wanting to have a business that's sellable in the next couple of years should really look at their revenue sources. How much of it's repeatable? How much of it's recurring? What are some things that they can do to make that more demonstrable to somebody that would be looking at the business? But be creative as well. It's not just about things under contract. It's different ways to make sure that same flow of business comes in. And yeah, good. All right. Well, Kathi, thanks a lot. And we'll be doing this again soon.
Thanks, Doug.
Yeah. All right. So selling the dream. We hope if you're out there thinking about selling your business, you're starting to put some of these ideas together. Keep in mind, we always tell folks 3 to 5 years before you want to be ready to do this is the time frame you really need to put some of these thoughts and practices in place. So you may not be ready today, but it's time to get ready for thinking about that pretty soon.
Thank you for listening to the Selling the Dream podcast, starring Doug Howard and Kathi Fleck. Both Doug and Kathi have built and sold successful businesses and hope this podcast will help other small business owners do the same. Tune in every week to hear more tips for increasing the value of your company so you get the highest return for your years of hard work when it comes time to sell or transition your business. Can't wait till next week? Check out our website for more information at www.growththemes.com.